Welcome to another episode of Cal's Corner radio show here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. And welcome. The executive producer of the show is, of course, the one and only Rob McConnell. And as everybody knows who listens to the show, and welcome for any first-time listeners here as well, on Cal's Corner here, we cover everything from politics to the paranormal. The show is unscripted, unrehearsed. Sometimes I think it shows. Other times I think that's part of hopefully what makes it of interest to you. And I'd like to thank you for all your support. The ratings continue to be really, really wonderful, and I can't thank you enough. Things continue to improve. And as long as it's a fascinating world out there and universe, which it always will be, we'll be there to try to talk about it and understand it and make sense of it. And I think from politics to paranormal, the double P's covers everything pretty much. All right, so let's get started. In tonight's episode, we are going to cover politics first and then the paranormal. So it's going to be a 50-50 thing here. The first thing we're going to cover is politics. What are we going to talk about? Well, we've absolutely got to talk about the hullabaloo, or whatever that word is, the controversy, if you will, that happened in Helsinki, Finland, when American President Donald Trump, who of course, half the country in America doesn't like him. A lot of Europeans don't like him. He's a polarizing figure, let's be honest about it. The whole election between him and Hillary Clinton, although she lost it, polarized not only the United States, but much of the world. And in Helsinki, Finland, Trump met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And, of course, they talked about a lot of things, and they met privately for a couple of hours just with their interpreters. And Trump said during that press conference he held with Putin that there was no way that he would see why it would be Russia that would have hacked into the American elections and tried to influence them. And, of course, the media, who both loves and hates Trump, they were all over Trump when he said he couldn't understand why it would be Russia. And you can understand why they were outraged. But it turns out they may have been wrong because Trump, according to him, he simply misspoke. And guess what, folks? It happens. He's human. In fact, in the press conference that he held, or rather the press attending the meeting he had when he returned to Washington, D.C., he read a statement, and he said what he should have said was that he couldn't understand why it wouldn't be Russia. Instead, he said why it would be Russia, which changes the whole meaning of the sentence. He said that several times. And then guess what happened, folks? The Trump-hating media especially, which is quite predictable because the so-called tolerant left is really the intolerant left. They are extremists. They've become that. They've lost this supposed high moral ground, if they ever had it. They have said, well, Trump's lying. He really did mean to say what he did. But there's one little reality that destroys their lying propaganda, and it's called official U.S. policy. Trump has said several times now, every time since then, that Russia is guilty. And he has ordered steps to be taken to counter and deal with that. And he has said that going forward, what's going to happen is that they're going to hold Russia accountable in various different ways. Now, we don't know what those ways are. There's no way to tell what they're going to be because you can't do that. The reason you can't do that is because events have yet to unfold. We must remember, folks, that it was Barack Obama who first dropped the ball on the issue of discovering Russian meddling in our election. Okay? And we'll come back to that in a moment. I'm not going to go on an anti-Obama tirade. I don't want anybody dismissing what I'm about to share with you as being that, because it's not. But it is a fact that in December of 2016, you can look it up, Obama issued a presidential executive order asking for a cybersecurity task force to basically be put together to come up with a series of recommendations on how to handle the issue of Russian meddling and hacking. In fact, to be very blunt about this issue, and you can ask many cybersecurity experts, there's even official investigations that have been done by the U.S. government on this issue. It turns out that under the Obama administration, some of the greatest hacking against the United States took place, not by Russia, but by communist China. Does anybody remember the stolen Joint Strike Fighter aircraft plans? Do you know how much those plans are worth? They're worth so much money, billions of dollars, that China now has deployed in combat operations, in actual theaters of theoretical warfare operation for the future and present. China now has ripped off copies of the Joint Strike Fighter flying around, which they were able to make from the stolen engineering blueprints that they were able to get by illegally hacking into the American systems as well as those of the defense contractors. And that happened under Obama's watch. And if you look at the Trump-hating media, where were they at that time? Weren't they outraged that this was treasonous or that this was just terrible for the United States? If you go back and Google the coverage, it's nowhere near as outrageous as it should have been, because it is a fighter that is a key milestone and cornerstone in our defensive and offensive arsenal. The Joint Strike Fighter is not just another aircraft. It is the aircraft for all the services and all of our allies. And that's why it's capable of taking off like a helicopter and hovering in midair, as well as acting as a fighter and even a delivery for nuclear weapons if necessary. It's very hard to track on radar. It's got the most advanced electronics in the world. And recently, Israel proved how valuable it is because they flew modified Joint Strike Fighters. The Israelis modified them for their particular needs into Iranian airspace with impunity and over Syria. And they weren't shot down. They weren't even seen. Instead, they used these aircraft to destroy terrorist targets, as Israel has a right to do. So what has happened in Helsinki has really forced a polarization to the head. The country has become even more polarized now. You could say even the global media. And you have Trump saying, I made a mistake. I meant to say wouldn't be Russia instead of would. But then you have the mainstream journalists in there lying to the people and trying to say it's Trump, it's the Russians, it's this collusion, even though there's no evidence of collusion. In fact, in Mueller's latest indictment, there is no evidence. He doesn't say that Trump colluded or his people colluded. Instead, they document attempts by the Russians to infiltrate the elections and affect them. And Russia's been doing that ever since they were communist, let's be honest. And we'll come back to that in a moment. So I've told you that the mainstream media has lied about this, that they refuse to believe what Trump has said. They refuse to accept his apology. That is a double standard, folks, because if Barack Obama had made a mistake in what he said, and he's made plenty of them, we're all human, we all misspeak. Remember when Gerald Ford, when he was debating Jimmy Carter, he said that the Polish people were free? Well, he misspoke. They weren't free. They were ruled by the Soviet Union. But that hurt him in the election. Ford apologized for it, but the media wouldn't let him have it because they were pro-Jimmy Carter. And we can see how well that worked out, can't we? Carter rightfully was defeated by Ronald Reagan later when he ran for re-election. Reagan creamed him, won all 50 states. He even beat Carter in his home state of Georgia, and that's the way it should have been. So now let's talk about a major journalist here on CNN, okay? You know Anderson Cooper. He hates Trump, of course. Let's be blunt about it. Well, Anderson Cooper, when he broadcast on CNN, his reactions and comments about Trump apologizing basically and saying, I made a mistake. I should have said wouldn't instead of would. Anderson Cooper actually used these words. He said, quote, they came up with this, unquote. Now, they came up with it. Instead of saying Trump admitted he made a mistake or he made a mistake or he said he misspoke, Anderson says they came up with it, like the Trump campaign, the White House, or Trump, like they lied. They come up with this excuse. Well, let's say Trump did lie. He's trying to cover his own rear end. Well, the evidence he didn't lie, that only Trump can know with 100% certainty, almost certainly misspoke. He's human. Donald Trump is human. Sorry to break that news to you, Trump haters. It seems that what matters going forward is official U.S. policy, okay? And that official policy is that Russia is guilty. And as long as that's the policy and we act on it and we do responsible things, it doesn't matter what people say. It ultimately matters what people do. So for all you bleeding heart Trump haters out there, you so-called liberals, progressives, whatever you want to call yourselves, if you refuse to believe that Trump misspoke, that he just lied, that he's Putin's puppet, that they've got something on him, then produce the evidence or shut up, and nobody can because it doesn't exist. That Russian dossier is not evidence, and it was paid for by the Clinton campaign. That's something, of course, that, the judge wasn't told when he granted the FISA warrant. And how can you explain that official U.S. policy is contradicting the idea that Trump lied when Trump is in charge of that policy? See, you can't have it both ways. It's like trying to say, I'm a little bit pregnant. No, it doesn't work that way. Not in the real world. But I argue that today's liberals, today's progressives, any American who dares to say that socialism is the answer to America's problems, it's not. It is delusional, it's wrong, and these people are not grounded in reality when they talk like this. In fact, they don't even know what socialism is, a lot of these young people. And I know that because I talk about them all the time. I ask people, do you know what socialism is? They'll tell me, oh, it's free education, free medicine. No, folks, it's not that simple. The very definition of socialism is when the state controls all the key important industries and economic enterprises in a country. It controls the radio, it controls the TV, it controls medicine, it controls the military, it controls, all the key aspects to a country's requirement to function. It controls the power companies. It controls the telephone companies. That is socialism. Now, if a government wants to give you a free education, that doesn't mean they're socialist, okay? That's different. Yeah, governments have different systems. It is cheap to go to some schools in certain countries. It's even free sometimes, like certain universities in Germany. But Germany is not a socialist country. It is a democratic country. We'll be back after this commercial break.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV. Plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
We live in rapidly shifting times of extreme volatility and uncertainty. Such profound change brings a unique opportunity for the evolution of consciousness. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, host of Mission Evolution Radio Show, a program that explores the latest scientific developments and deepening spiritual truths supporting human evolution. Join me on xzbn.net, where I interview leading experts in science, physics, medicine, spirituality, and more. By applying divergent viewpoints to leading-edge topics, we uncover expansive and evolutionary truth to assist you on your path to enlightenment. More information and past episodes are available at missionevolution.org.
Welcome back to the second segment here on Cal's Corner Radio Show. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. And the executive producer of the show is, of course, Rob McConnell. Now, let's talk about Russia for a moment, and let's talk about interfering in other people's elections. You know, as an American who knows history, I love history. I've always been at least an A or A+ student in history when I was growing up. My favorite era of history, at least one of them, is World War II and the Cold War. Well, when I hear American leaders say, we don't interfere in other people's elections, that's a lie. And anybody who says that is either ignorant of history or they are lying. It's one or the other, or maybe both. Now, the United States officially, and you can Google this, it's even in Wikipedia, folks, has interfered officially. And that means in instances we know of that are not secret or something, still withheld from the public. The United States has interfered in at least 80 different elections in last century alone. Okay? The reason the Shah of Iran was put into power, is because the CIA coup put him in there. The British came up with the coup, and they couldn't pull it off, so they asked Kermit Roosevelt. Yes, he's related to President Franklin Roosevelt, and they worked with the CIA to install the Shah. And then the blowback of that was the rise of Ayatollah Khamenei in Iran and the Iranian Revolution, which the world is still paying for, and the Iranian people in a negative way ever since. So when people say that the United States doesn't interfere in other people's elections, and Barack Obama said this and he lied, it's not true. In fact, Barack Obama made a point to interfere when he was president in other people's elections. In fact, he made the point of elections irrelevant. He would just overthrow the dictator. Remember Muammar Gaddafi? He's dead. Well, who got him out of power? Obama. Do you remember, what happened with the other interference that Obama did when he went ahead and, tried to interfere in other countries as well? He did, he tried to interfere in the election in Israel. Okay, it didn't work. And while Obama apologists will say, well, no, he wasn't trying to interfere with the election to keep Netanyahu from getting reelected. Yes, he was. They were doing it through charitable organizations. And the way that works, folks, is very simple. There's a charity among many called USAID. It sounds great. USAID, Aid from America. Well, USAID is often used as a cover for the CIA and the U.S. government to go in there and get their spies in and to try to influence a country to either do what America wants or what they think should be done. And if you want to see a great example of how USA really works, USAID works versus what the official shtick is. First of all, it gets millions of dollars from the U.S. government. So here is a so-called humanitarian organization who is funded in large parts by the U.S. government, and yet it is used as a vehicle to go in there and, put spies into a country. I can promise you the country of Pakistan has been infiltrated at all levels by the U.S. government. It's not a secret in Pakistan. It's not even a secret in India. And I lived in India for 7 years, and I can tell you everyone talks about it there, okay, when they're not talking about cricket and other things. And if you read the leaked report on bin Laden that the Pakistani government did, and I have a copy of it. In fact, I was one of the people who got one of the early copies, and I've reported on it extensively. It complains about how Pakistani society has been compromised from top to bottom by CIA personnel and spies and so on. Of course, China's in there too, Russia's in there. Nations spy on each other. Now, I'm not saying that it's automatically right to interfere in another country's business. It really depends on what's going on. When World War II was going on and Hitler was in power and the Nazis were invading other countries and started World War II, you better believe it was right to step in and stop them. But did the Democrats want to do that for many years? No. They just said, it's not our problem, it's Europe's problem. Let Hitler have Europe. Even England, we don't care. But thankfully, Franklin Delano Roosevelt felt differently, and using some skullduggery and using accounting tricks and, loopholes in laws, he was able to go ahead and supply military materiel and resources to Great Britain to try to hang in there and survive the Nazis. And then the United States people and the Congress finally woke up and decided to stop Hitler Not after Hitler did something to them, but after the Japanese invaded Pearl Harbor and destroyed it. So, again, look at that twisted dynamic. We didn't care about the Nazis at the time and what they were doing to Europe. And then we only care when Japan attacks us. Then we decide to declare war on both. That's not really the way that we should run things if we're supposed to be the moral nation that we claim to be. And this is the problem today. We have to admit, whether we like the idea of Russian interference or not, that we also interfere in their elections, but we're not as good as they are at interfering in ours because our society is more free, therefore it's more vulnerable. And when you have almost non-existent serious cybersecurity policies that have always been a problem with the U.S. government, allowing things like the Joint Strike Fighter engineering blueprints to be stolen, well, then, of course, the other side is going to have an advantage, and they're going to do a much better job, and they're going to do much more damage. Then you have the rise of social media and fake news. That gives the Russian intelligence services and enemies of the United States extra fertile ground to go ahead and, get this stuff done or try to interfere with other countries. Now, let's talk about Russia. Independent of their issue of meddling in our elections, and they will continue to spy and do so. They'll continue to develop their nuclear weapons and all that other stuff. We have to get along with Russia. Trump is right on that, and he's not the first one to say it. You know, it really bothers me that people are so upset that Trump met with Putin by himself. My God, are you guys so ignorant of basic history? Don't you even remember that one of the highlights of the Reagan administration was when Ronald Reagan walked alone with Mikhail Gorbachev of the former Soviet Union, and they had a mano-a-mano conversation only with their interpreters, and the result of that conversation meant that the Cold War was going to end? Don't you even remember your basic history, that Reagan did it? Trump has done it. When Obama did his Middle East apology tour, as his critics would call it, he met with very bad people. He was criticized, but yet the same people who are criticizing Trump for doing it are now saying it was okay that Obama did it, but it's bad when Trump does it. This is so convoluted and twisted. Just pick a position and stick to it, but don't be a friggin' hypocrite. And I'd like to use a much stronger word than frigging, but this is a family show. So the point is, the hypocrisy here. When even Harry Truman had met with Stalin and praised Stalin, called Stalin a nice guy, an intelligent guy, that Stalin was a victim of his Politburo, none of that was true. Stalin wasn't nice. He was a mean guy, yes, very intelligent and cunning, but Stalin wasn't a victim of his Politburo. Stalin controlled the Politburo. So when Stalin had millions of people murdered for no valid reason, he did it on his own, not because he's a nice guy, because he was exactly the opposite of that, one of the most evil people who ever lived. Yet Harry Truman, a Democrat, met with him. And Stalin was a lot worse than Vladimir Putin will ever be. And even Trump haters would have to admit that unless they're lying. So once again, we have this uneven standard, this hypocrisy. And what is happening is American society is becoming even more polarized than it is now. I mean, if you look at the dynamics of the Clinton and Trump presidential election against each other for the White House, whenever you have an election where one person barely beats the other, or it's roughly 50-50 for lack of a better term, the country's going to be polarized. It's been my observation as a fellow American. When I left the United States in 2000 and I had moved to Europe, of course, the next presidential election at that time was Bush versus Gore. Gore won the popular vote, but he lost the electoral vote. Same with Hillary Clinton, only a much bigger margin in her case, biggest margin in history, at least regarding the EC issue, Electoral College issue. So I wrote and talked about, even on the earlier incarnations of the show with Rob, that the country has become polarized now because half the country's mad that Gore lost, the other half is mad that Bush won, or is happy that Bush won. Same with Clinton. Let's say Clinton had won the White House. Half of America would still be mad. I'd be mad. I didn't want her in the White House. I didn't vote for Trump either. I think both the Democrats and the Republicans are hopeless, meaning they're They've sold out. They've caused all of the problems America is facing. And as the great Abraham Lincoln said, and he's right, and he said this over 100 years ago, 150 years ago, that America will never be destroyed from the outside. What he basically said is that it will destroy itself from the inside. And that is exactly what's happening, folks. Unless we stop being so polarized, we have to come together as Americans, first and foremost, as people who are Americans, and we have to put our country first. Remember what John Kennedy said very famously, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Well, try telling that to millennials today who think that the world owes them a living. I have to laugh when, almost a third of them aren't sure the Earth is round. Hello, you've got Google. Even if you have Google Earth, does Google Earth have a logo that shows the Earth flat? No. So can you at least pay attention to your startup screen and say, wow, the Earth is round? You can even see a round moon. Planets are round. Duh. What are you doing in school? Are you asleep? Are you even listening to your science teacher? There's so much convolution with this millennial stuff, these millennials, that if we don't solve this, there's no future, because you can't have a superpower running around who the majority of the populace believes or suspects or isn't sure that the Earth is round. I mean, that's the most extreme example I can give you, because it's probably the most ridiculous in these surveys of millennials that I've seen come back. So we need to get along with Russia. We can't go to war with them. We have to find common ground. We need their help in the Middle East. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And yes, they do meddle, but that's nothing new. We'll be back after the break.
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Den.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, After the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back to the third segment here on Cal's Corner radio show. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is the one and only Rob McConnell. Now, folks, we're only going to spend about 5 more minutes or so on the subject of Russia and Trump haters and all that other stuff. Then we're going to switch to the paranormal and talk about UFOs. And I have what I hope is an exciting announcement on that front. And yes, I'm deliberately leaving it to the end of the show. All right. Let's finish off what we're talking about on Russia. Once again, it doesn't matter whether Russia hacked into the elections or not from the standpoint that we still need to get along with Russia, okay? So whether they did or didn't do it or what they did or didn't do, we need to get along with Russia. We need to get along with China. We need to get along with everyone who has nuclear weapons. I think that's kind of obvious. But if you listen to the rhetoric on the left and the Democrats, I call them Dumbocrats because they make the Keystone Cops look like Einsteins by comparison sometimes. You'd act like, oh, Russia's our enemy and we should do whatever. They don't have any solutions, okay? The next time, try this experiment. The next time that somebody says, we must punish Russia for what they did, ask them, how are you going to do that? Are you going to declare war on them? What do you want to do? Wipe out the earth? That isn't going to work. Ask them about Syria. Ask them, do you think we need Russia's help in Syria? Yes or no? And of course, if they're honest, or at least half informed on what's going on in Syria, they'll admit that, yeah, without Russia's help, the Islamic State, the terrorist group, wouldn't be almost 100% defeated. Because once Putin stepped in, when Obama was president, boy, did things go very fast. The Russians bombed the you-know-what out of them. And unlike Obama, where they were concerned about so-called casualties, even though Obama lied about that fact, and I'll prove it real quickly, you have to remember that when Obama became president, they raised the age of the definition of a terrorist who might be killed in a drone strike or a bombing raid. What they did is they said anybody 16 or over is a terrorist, okay? And by doing that, they were able to raise the number of so-called terrorists they killed, whereas before Obama became president, that 15-year-old wasn't a terrorist. He was some nephew visiting his terrorist uncle, and he was counted and categorized as an innocent civilian casualty. But to lower artificially the number of civilian casualties and raise artificially, meaning BS-wise, the number of terrorists killed, Obama cooked the books and agreed to a redefinition championed by the CIA, and all of a sudden, only terrorists were being killed and very little civilians, even though many of them were under age 16. So that's the kind of dirty, disgusting, immoral, inhumane game that Obama played while he's talking out of the other side of his mouth saying, we're concerned about civilian casualties. Yeah, right. You just juggled their age there, therefore you can reclassify them. That's how concerned you are. And where was Anderson Cooper then? Was he outraged? Was he upset? Where were the Democrats? Where were the progressives? Nowhere, because it wasn't Trump. Trump hadn't even emerged on the picture yet. If Bush had done it, they'd have been outraged. But when Obama does it, it's holy. So this is the kind of nonsense that has been going on. How are you going to solve Syria without Russian help? Well, you can go to Iran and ask for their help, right? Ain't going to work. Okay, so what's going to happen now? How are you going to solve Syria? Well, you can pull out. It's not our problem. Yeah, and then let ISIS go back in there and continue to attack the world. Ooh, that's a really brilliant solution too. See, this is the thing. The Democrats at this point in time have one single political strategy. Destroy Trump. Don't offer solutions. Just complain. Just say, we hate him. We want him out of there. We want to delegitimize him. Well, I'm sorry. Unless you start offering solutions, you become the problem. Don't tell me what the problem is if we already know it. Okay? Tell me, start working on solutions. Start proposing them. So yes, we have to get along with Russia. And there are ways to do it. Another quick area of hypocrisy here, NATO. The left-wing liberal media is all upset that Trump is making NATO members pay the 2% that they promised to pay to help defend themselves. Gee, you promised to pay 2% of your GDP so that you can continue to survive. But then you don't do it. The U.S. bells your fat out of the fire, but that's okay. But then when the president, happens to be Trump, comes over and says, you should start paying your fair share, which you promised to do. You haven't done it. Most of the countries haven't done it over there. Of the 28, 29 members, only 3 or 4 have. And then the rest haven't. And it's Trump's fault that he's asking them to pay their fair share. He's evil for doing that. He's hurting the alliance when he asked them to hold up their end that they agreed to. Excuse me? Since when did doing the right thing, asking people to keep their commitments that they willingly made and said they could do, when is it become wrong to suddenly ask that they keep their word? Well, you'd have to ask the Dumbocrats that question. Ask Anderson Cooper. And I'll bet you they don't have a credible answer because it's just nonsense. So we're going to come back to this issue on this show as long as it's around. It's not going to end today, folks. It's only going to get worse because going forward, you have this, again, polarization, this stupid implosion that's going on where nobody seems to focus on the issues and the principles behind the rhetoric. It's the principles that matter. We've become a society instead that values rhetoric over action. And I got words for you. I've told many Democrats and liberals this so many times. Words don't matter. What matters are tangible actions that deliver on what those words promised. If I tell you I'm never going to go ahead and hurt anybody and I'm out there hurting people, well, my words mean nothing. If a husband says, honey, I love you, I'm faithful, but he goes and cheats on his wife, words mean nothing. If I say, like Nixon did, I'm not a crook, but I'm having my former CIA guys break into the Democrats' national headquarters and steal their stuff, well, he is a crook. He broke the law. So go beyond the rhetoric. Let them say whatever. That's fine. That's important. But if they don't back it up with tangible deliverables, then they have lost their credibility. And it seems to me that the left and the Trump haters, they have forgotten this principle. And Trump supporters need to remember it too. Remember, Trump said he wants to be the president for everybody. He wanted to improve Obamacare. He hasn't done it. He's made it worse. He wanted to put more money in the pockets of Americans. Well, for the ones that are true lower middle class, that hasn't happened yet. I don't know if it's going to happen. I'm skeptical it will because this is the Republicans. Since when do they care about poor people? They keep cutting benefits. Again, this type of stuff cannot continue. So what you've got to have is the rhetoric matching the action lockstep with the rhetoric. That's the way you get things done. All right, enough about that. Let's switch to UFOs and the paranormal. Folks, probably a little over a month ago, maybe 6 weeks, I announced on my Facebook page, which is open to the public, by the way. Just search for Kal Korff on Facebook. You can tell it's me. There used to be some imposter sites out there by cyber stalkers, but hopefully you're intelligent enough to distinguish between them. I announced that that I have the honor of being a executive producer for a new series. I said I'm going to give you more info about that in the near future. Well, it's the near future now. I'm going to announce it today, and I'm really excited about this. Folks, I'm genuinely honored and humbled to tell you that I'm going to be producing a minimum of 6 episodes, may do more, depends on how these 6 do, that will tackle some of the greatest mysteries of all time, mysteries that people still care about today. They cover everything from UFOs to JFK's assassination, etc., conspiracies, a lot of stuff. 6 different shows, 6 different subjects. And I promise you, the definitive verdict on these subjects will be in these episodes. The name of the series is called X Zone Investigates. And I'm going to be the host of these first 6 episodes. I'm honored to be able to do this, to be part of a production series that is going to definitively solve some cases. It's just a dream come true as a journalist, as a human being. And one of the greatest things about facts, and I think everyone would agree with this, even millennials, the greatest thing about facts is that they can be independently verified by anybody. They don't care about anybody's opinion. They're inviolate. They stand on their own. So when these episodes are done, folks, what I'm really happy about is they're going to be interactive enough, graphically rich enough, and using online technologies, courtesy of X-Zone, where you'll be able to interact with the data and independently verify it for yourself. And then it may even change your opinion. I hope you'll always go with the truth. So let's say that you believe in Conspiracy X, and Conspiracy X is what one of these episodes will be covering. Well, we will solve that, or we won't do that episode. We're not going to leave anybody hanging. And whatever your beliefs are, you'll have the facts here, and hopefully you'll endorse those because you can check them. You can even, depending on who your friends are, you could even pull a Penn and Teller and make bets with them. You know, if you've seen the episodes and your friend hasn't and he believes it, you could bet him and say, I'll bet you this isn't real. And then you watch the episode and you find out you won the bet because it isn't real, whatever it is. Or maybe it is real. So I'm not going to tell you right now what the 6 different mystery cases are. The reason I want to tell you is because there's going to be a press release coming out in the next few days by Mr. Rob McConnell of X-Zone, and with some statements in it by me as well. We will then list those episodes. But I will tell you about one of them, and it's episode 6, and I'm really excited about it. We've been talking about it over the last few weeks here when I had Dr. Bruce Maccabee on the show. He honored us by being on 2 consecutive episodes of this radio program here. And he talked about the Tic Tac case. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howe will expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
The concept of a new age has been around since the late 19th century, yet much of its original meaning has been lost. What exactly is the new age? Is it a religion, a collection of obscure esoteric practices, a series of doomsday predictions, or an astrological event? The New Age Chronicles is a unique complementary publication bringing reason and grounded information to separate fact from fiction. Chock full of valuable information to support you as we make the monumental shift into the new era. You won't want to miss a single innovative issue. The New Age Chronicles newspaper is coming soon to www.newagechronicles.com.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment of Cal's Corner Radio here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is, of course, Rob McConnell. Now, folks, you may detect them a little bit hyped for this show. I'm really excited about it for two things. One is the circus in Helsinki bothered me because, again, I lived in Europe for 10 years, and I know how the Europeans are, and I know the circus that goes on there, and I also know the circus that the Democrats play and the Trump haters, as well as some Trump supporters play, supporting him too much the other way. Again, the problem is polarization. The truth is somewhere in the middle, and what's important is we must embrace that truth and put it first and foremost. Now, switching to the announcement about the new shows coming up. That will be on the X-Zone Broadcast Network via Simul TV. I'm really excited about those because imagine you're a journalist or anybody, I guess, whatever you do for a living, and you have the chance to host and produce shows in partnership with Rob that produce the final verdict, if you will, on a certain subject. I don't think it gets any better than that. And again, to do it in a way where anybody can double check the data and we can settle an issue, because that's what ultimately matters. It's a concept called resolution. I find it as a journalist and as a human being offensive that decades after something supposedly happened, look at Roswell, for example, we still don't know what happened. Well, why don't we know? Now, I admit that there are certain things that we'll never know. Like we may never know whether there's a God until we're dead. Okay? So far, there seems to be no evidence that somebody dies and comes back and said, yep, God's real and he looks like this. Looks like that just doesn't happen. But there are other subjects where we can solve the truth. And it's important that we pursue it and then get it out to the global public. It's literally global now, billions of people online, and let them decide what they're going to decide. They're going to do it anyway, but at least give them the facts to make an informed decision. Or at least if you disagree with them, and you're on the internet, you can say, hey, look at this. You're wrong. And the guy will say, you're right. I'm wrong. I learned something. Hey, that's always positive. So one of the cases I will tell you that we're going to go after on this show is, as Bruce mentioned it, Dr. Bruce Maccabee, who was on here again a couple weeks ago for 2 consecutive episodes, it's the Tic Tac UFO case. That's the nickname for it. I mock it sometimes. I call it the Tic Tac case. Let me tell you why we're going after that. We're going after it because, as I said in previous episodes, we can find the truth here. And whenever we can find the truth, we must make a point to go after it. If we know it's not possible to find the truth, it's kind of a waste of time and electrons to bother. Okay? But in this case, we can solve it, and that's what matters, regardless of what the final verdict is. And let me break it down for you. We must remember that in December of last year, the U.S. government basically declassified, apparently, some footage that shows an object being chased by a pilot, and that object just, boom, leaves the pilot in his aircraft behind as if he's standing still. Now, this is a fighter aircraft he was in, one of the most advanced made on the planet, and this object just leaves him in the dust. Right there, you've eliminated a lot of possibilities to explain that sighting. You can't say that was a bunch of geese flying around. You can't say that's a guy with his little Amazon-controlled radio Bluetooth drone. No. Was it Russian? Was it Chinese? Was it one of ours? If it wasn't from the U.S., it wasn't from China, if it wasn't from Russia, well, that kind of eliminates a lot of possibilities at that point. Maybe it wasn't from Earth at all. Regardless of what it either was from the Earth or it wasn't. That much is clear. What is important is that this is one of the few UFO cases where we can get to the bottom of this. But here's where it gets even more interesting. You see, as Dr. Bruce Maccabee mentioned, he mentioned a name that's very important, Robert Gandolfi, Dr. Robert Gandolfi. Now, he was with the CIA. He still may be. We're going to find out. We're going to find out when we investigate from this show. He worked the so-called Weird Desk, which supposedly handled UFOs at the CIA. Kind of a Fox Mulder type guy, if you want a bit of a stretch, right? Okay, he's basically the CIA's version of Nick Pope, who ran the UFO desk at the British Ministry of Defense. And Nick Pope now lives in the USA. We may talk to him in the future. So here's Gandolfi. His nose is in the case. He's talking about portals, that's how they traverse the tremendous distances of time and space. He's got a wife that supposedly is a being that was brought here to Pakistan through one of these portals or whatever she supposedly arrived in. Well, I got news for you. I got plenty of friends in India, and I even have friends in Pakistan. She's human, folks. She's not an alien. But my question, as I mentioned to Bruce, is why would the CIA, why would the government go ahead and say, here's a UFO, here's a craft we can't explain, here's the footage, the pilot's talking, the guy who ran this secret operation is talking. Okay, have a good day, folks. It's just really bizarre. And if you look at the New York Times, who printed that story, I'm sorry, those journalists should be fired. And I hope to talk to some of them. I'm going to approach them when we do this show. Because I'll tell you why. If I was a journalist and someone came to me and said, here's an actual video clip taken from a pilot. He's chasing a flying saucer. And it's not from here. It's doing things that we can't do. It's dropping from 70,000 feet down to just above the surface of the ocean in less than 1 second. Whoa. Okay, that would squish a human being if they were in there flying that thing. Okay, maybe that's an argument that it was unmanned. But the point is, do we have anything in our arsenal that could do that? That could just leave in the dust one of our most advanced fighter aircraft that we deploy in combat operations? He's chasing this thing? Well, regardless of what it is, whether it's a secret U.S. government device, incredibly advanced, or it's not from here, we need to know. We need to know because the government itself, through these people, put it out there. So what we're going to do on this show is we're going to investigate it. That's the point of the show, and we're going to solve it one way or another. So there are questions here. Gandolfi working at the CIA. Well, the CIA, like every large government entity, has an HR department. So is what Gandolfi doing? Is he doing it officially as part of his job description? Is it okay with HR that he's sitting there telling the American people this? Or is it that it's not okay with HR and he's gone rogue and he's doing it on his own? What are the consequences of that? We don't know. And then there's the whole issue of how we even know about this video. We must remember that we only know about it because former House Senate leader Harry Reid got as much as $22 million. Now, that's a lot of zeros. $22 million. He gives it to Robert Bigelow, who's a well-known UFO paranormal guy. He's been into the subject for many years. And he gives him that money, and they're supposed to investigate UFOs and come back to Reid and say whether there's something to it or whether they should be concerned about whether the Earth might be being visited by aliens from another planet, or maybe this is technology from China or Russia, and we should know about that too because it affects national security. Valid issues. But the mechanism for determining that already exists. It's called the Pentagon. It's called the CIA. It's called the National Security Agency. Okay, it's called the National Reconnaissance Organization. At least that was the old name. They controlled the satellites. Now it's the geospatial, entity. So the point is, or agency. So the point is the government has already in place, official entities, government agencies that study these kinds of things, all right? If you think Russia launches a rocket to the U.S., you don't think there's a government agency or entity or part of the military that's supposed to handle that and respond accordingly? Of course it exists. So my question as an American taxpayer is, why is my money going to a donor of Harry Reid, $22 million, to study the question of whether we're being visited by little gray men or whether these UFOs being reported are actually advanced objects from China or Russia, which would be a military threat to us, maybe even an existential threat, depending on what it is? Why is money being spent given to a private guy and some UFO researchers to work on this so-called disclosure thing when the government already has the right people in place and billions of dollars of resources, trillions of dollars, thousands of military people around the world, radar installations, aircraft, satellites, you name it, to already answer and tell us that, to solve that issue. All Harry Reid had to do was pick up the phone and say, hey, have you ever picked up any blah, blah, blah? He simply had to ask the question, because if the data was already there by something being tracked in space, like the so-called fast walkers, it would already exist. Why does he need to give $22 million to one of his donors to solve that question? Okay? It makes no sense, folks. There has to be accountability on how taxpayer dollars are spent, and this just stinks. So this is ripe for investigation. It must be solved. It must be resolved, and that is the objective of the episode 6 of this show. It's going to take a bit to do, but we're going to pursue it as journalists, straight up through the front door, no skullduggery. We're just going to do it straight up the old-fashioned way. And whatever the truth is, whatever the facts are that come out of this, I'm happy with it, because I'm happy that we found the truth, and that's what ultimately matters. So this new show I'm very excited about. We've already are in pre-production. There will be a press release coming out on this in a few days, this upcoming next week. It will tell you more about it. There'll start to be an online presence about it. Your input and feedback are welcome. We'll listen to everybody that makes sense to listen to, meaning you want to send us any data you have on this. We'll have an address for you, all that stuff. This is coming, folks. Nothing's going to stop it. And if these government agencies do their job, like the GAO, the Inspector General, HR office, and so on, we'll know the answers to these questions. And maybe we can put an end to this so-called aviary where the U.S. government uses disinformation to mess with UFO researchers, using UFOs as a cover story for what are really classified operations. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com, or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.